Welcome to the 2023 Leading Transformational Change Forum. I'm Deb Seidman. I am a contributor to the book, The Secret Sauce of Leading Transformational Change, and I am delighted to welcome you to this session with Adrienne Shoch, also a contributor to the book. Adrienne, we're really fortunate to have her with us today. She's the founder of 5-to-1 Consulting, which is a leadership and organization development organization. Her development philosophy blends positive leadership, communication skill, neuroscience, and presence with research and science-based practices. This is the essence of Adrienne's work. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Adrienne to take you through the art of listening for connection.
Awesome. Thank you, Deb. And thanks to everybody who's joining us this afternoon. I'm delighted to be here. And I'm also grateful for you taking the time to join us, knowing that there are so many other things that are competing for our time. So this is an honor, and I've been really looking forward to it. So thank you for joining. We're going to just kind of jump right in here. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to just quickly go through what are we going to talk about. I'm going to start out with a little story. We're going to do a little bit of reflection. You can participate in the chat if you feel free. I'd love to see your comments and thoughts when there's an opportunity to share. We're going to go through a model, the 4 levels of listening by Otto Scharmer. And we'll do a little bit more reflection, and then there'll be some takeaways for you to think about or action items that you can take out into the world to bring your listening to another level. So that's what's in store for us over the next 25 minutes or so. So we will... having trouble moving my slide. There we go. So I want to start with a quote. And this quote's by Otto Scharmer, and I'll read it as you read it. Learning to raise the quality of listening is one of the biggest leverage points for change. Achieving any significant change or innovation without the capacity of deep listening is impossible. So this aligns really well to the work that we've done with C4C and in the book. It's really, how do we achieve any significant change? And we need to do it with the capacity to listen. So having said that, let's move to a brief story that I want to share with you. That's a personal story, and I want to bring you to 2019, when I am living in Washington, D.C. with my 2 children. And I've been living there for about more than 20 years. And it was my favorite neighborhood in DC. My kids loved it. It was close to family and friends. Our community was there, close to schools. And it really felt like our forever home. But between 2019 and my kids entering college, I started to have this gnawing voice in the back of my head that was saying, why are you living here? And if you don't leave now, you're going to be here forever. And is that what you want out of this life? And what's my purpose? These kinds of questions. So fast forward to my kids entering college that same year, and I sold my house. And it wasn't because of these elusive questions that kept coming up. I had no plan, and there was no desirable outcome. I just did it. So reflect on that story for a second. And for some of you, you may have heard something that was familiar, or you may have heard something that you may know somebody who's had a similar experience with. You also might have had an experience where you thought, that's crazy, or I wouldn't have done that. But really, overall, some of you would have had an experience of this story resonating, that you would connect to it or disconnect from it. So what we know about how we respond to stories illustrates how we listen, and what we listen for, and what we do with our listening. So today, I want to explore one of the most powerful skills in leadership and relationship success. Listening is essential for leadership and relationship success. And it is at the source of most, I'd say most, relationship and leadership failure. So listening is a capability that we're wired to do well. It's innate to our being. And we know that when it's through our listening that we have the power to deepen human connection. We have the ability to bring ease and greater access to relationships. And more importantly, and most importantly, we can make the world a better place. So that's why I'm really keen on listening for a number of reasons. But I'd be interested in hearing what's meaningful to you. Why are you interested in listening? So if you want to share anything in the chat, double check it out. But what's meaningful to you when it comes to listening? Ah, thank you, Lee. I'm not good at it either. That's why I'm doing this. Awesome. Cheryl, to understand. Thanks, Randy, to foster more accurate disagreements. Excellent. And it feels like my voice matters. That's beautiful. So thanks, everybody. Just another moment to reflect. And that speaks to, there are two parts to listening, and I want to invite you to consider just for a moment that listening is as much about others as it is about ourselves. And I don't know where I heard this phrase, but being heard nurtures the seeds of belonging. So I don't think I came up with it, but I wrote it down somewhere. But it really nurtures the seeds of belonging. So let's take a look at this model from Ardo Sharma, where he tells us more about our ability to listen. So he tells us a couple of things that I want to highlight. First thing, there is no right level of listening. It's not about the best level of listening or where we should be. It's really about understanding that listening is contextual. It is the right level of listening comes with the right situation. So really, this is about intentional listening. It really, when we're listening well, it affects the outcome of our actions. So just think about that. Bear that in mind as we're going through this model. It's not about a right level of listening. There is no right or wrong. They're all right in the right time and in the right place. So let's look at downloading. So this is level one. So we're listening for what we already know to be true. So we're listening from the space of our beliefs and our judgment. So this listening is 90% of all listening. It's default, it's habitual. And again, we're listening for what is consistent with what our beliefs are and what we already know to be true. It's anchored in the past. It's a source of validation, and it's non-participatory. And so what I mean by that is when we're listening more from the space from which we're experiencing what someone else is saying, more than what they're actually saying, right? So the listening is about us and our reaction to it, more than the person that we're listening from. Level 2, factual listening. So we're listening for what's inconsistent with our beliefs and assumptions, and this heightens our awareness. So we're really listening for differences here. Now, we know that engineers, scientists really listen well and zero in on factual listening. And in fact, Charles Darwin would keep a notebook on hand to constantly document anything that would disconfirm any of his hypotheses. So really, he's listening for differences. He's listening for what don't I know that somebody else might know that I need to think about? So let's move to level 3, empathic listening. So this is listening from the space from which someone else is speaking or experiencing something. So this is the source of connection and transformation. this is where our listening begins to shift. So we're moving away from our listening that's anchored in the past, and we're moving into more presence-based listening. We're suspending our beliefs. We're suspending our assumptions of what may be right or wrong, and we're really opening up to the source of our listening, which is no longer in our heads, but that the source of our listening has moved to the field. So we're listening from a place from which someone else is speaking. So the listening at this level is also participatory. And what I say by that, what I mean by that is we begin to our biophysiology begins to interact and participate with our listening. So what that looks like is maybe our hearts start to accelerate, or maybe our chest gets tight, or there's a lump in our throat. Our pupils may dilate. We may want to cry or hug somebody. So it's really participatory. And the idea here is really the experience of the listening is really more about the source of our listening, which is someone else, than our response and reaction to it. So if you can imagine, there's a spotlight in level 1 and 2 that's really shining on us. So we are the source of our listening. And when that listening shifts to the field, that spotlight is shining on the person that is speaking to us. So it's really the field, the external source of our listening becomes the source of our listening. So something to think about. It's a powerful source. It's the emergence of how we connect. And lastly, on level 4, generative listening is we're listening for an emerging future. We're listening for possibility. And this is a creative space. This is a highly innovative space. And again, we're suspending our beliefs and our judgments of what we believe to be right or wrong. We're now listening for the future, right? We're listening for what's possible. So we know that great coaches listen at level 4, and also great consultants. And this is about holding space. So when we are listening generatively, we're seeing possibility for an emerging future that other people may not see. So sometimes as a coach, and I'm a coach, I can hold the space for something greater than someone can see for themselves. So I'm really looking and listening for the highest good. What is the greatest possibility that is in store for this person or this situation? So that's generative listening. It's really in service of the highest potential of our greatest good. So why don't we take a second to think about what we've just shared and think about what these 4 levels of listening mean to you. And we'll just take a little pause. So I want to bring up a couple of examples for you to consider. And how do we see this in action? So an example of listening in action is a time when our listening can get stuck. And we can observe this. We actually see this often, particularly when we're watching the news, or there's panelists, or there's some level of disagreement. We're looking at the listening being stalled, right? It's stuck in a level. Typically, we see that in level 1 or level 2. So when people are talking at each other, they're really not listening, right? It's stalled. Another way to look at this, and where I see this come up in my work, and I do a fair amount of strategic planning, is what happens when we listen in an innovative space. So if we're doing brainstorming, for example, and we're listening for people's contributions that could sound something like, why don't we start selling components, instead of the machines themselves? We can extend the portfolio, we can reach more clients or customers. There's a great possibility there. And someone shares, well, wait, we can't do that. Our clients don't like that. Our suppliers won't use us if we do something like that. So we begin to see these competing levels of listening bump up against each other. Another example that you might see if you're familiar with SWOT, the SWOT exercise of identifying strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, is when we are listening from the opportunity space or the opportunity quadrant, And we're moving into the threat quadrant. So what we know from our listening here is, the opportunity quadrant is really generative. There's a lot of possibility in that space. But moving to the threat space is really listening from our past. It's downloading, it's factual. So how do we ease the flow of our listening when we've got the word competing levels? And so I want you to think about, what would be the secret sauce of our listening if we could bridge generative listening with factual listening? What would that look like? And I don't know if any of you want to share, so I'm gonna dive in here. It's level 3. Our empathic listening is what bridges the gap between generative listening and factual listening, or downloading and empathetic. The home base here is always going back to listening for connection in level 3, going back to listening from the place from which someone else is speaking, because there's something that they're trying to tell you that you just don't know yet. So having said all that, let's take a moment to go to another lens of the same model. And this is the 4 levels of listening, but look what Otto's done here. So we're going to look at this from a deeper lens. And so when we're looking at level 2 listening, what that's doing is it's creating curiosity. It's, hey, I didn't know that. That's inconsistent with what I thought. Our minds begin to open. It's a curious space. When we look at level 3, the empathic listening, we are opening up our hearts. We're seeing an experience through someone else's eyes. And level 4 is really courage. It's courageous. It's having the will to open ourselves to a new possibility. So take a moment and think about, what does that mean for your listening? So I'm just going to read these words. So there's a quality of presence in our listening, which allows us to suspend thoughts and beliefs and hold space for something different or better through an open mind, an open heart, and an open will. So again, just take a second to reflect. What are you noticing about the way you're listening? What are you noticing about the listening from the people around you? So before we continue, I want to take a little bit of a detour. And I want to share with you, people ask very often, what is a hindrance to our ability to listen? What gets in the way of our ability to listen? And we're not going to go down this road here, but there's something to consider here that's important. And in my experience, it really seems like the biggest inhibitor to our ability to listen is stress. And we're not only talking about an amygdala hijack, so there's a lot of neuroscience in our ability to listen. But when we're experiencing this amygdala hijack of fight, flight, or freeze, our listening is greatly diminished if not offline. We know that, like tunnel vision, when we're in a high stress situation, our line of vision narrows, our listening narrows, right? So it's a part of executive functioning that really takes a hit when we're stressed. And in addition to these fight, flight, or freeze moments, this low grade ongoing stress eats at the listening. We don't have the capacity. So I want you to think about that. As we had mentioned before, the biophysiology is involved with our listening. It is not standalone. When our biophysiology is disrupted, our brain is disrupted, our listening is disrupted. So we have an invitation for action here. And I want you to think about, what might you be able to shift in your quality of listening? is there anything that you can walk away from this experience and think, I might want to try one thing differently? Just take a second to think about what that might be. Okay. Okay, so we will looks like I want to make sure we have a question. Can we see the quote again after talking about the 4 levels of listening? Yes. The quote after the 4 levels of listening. Let me jump right back there before we go on. 1 second. Bear with me. After. Sorry. All right, we will come back to this because I can't quite get there, but we'll definitely go back to this at the end. So I want to move to this experience of why listening matters and why it matters for me. The quality of our listening attentions, the quality of our attention determines our impact. Our listening shapes our attention. Change and innovation require deep, quality listening. Being heard nurtures the seeds of belonging and diminishes polarization. And listening deepens our human connection. It brings ease and greater access to our relationships, and it makes the world a better place. So I want to close this time with you. We'll go do a little Q&A in just a minute with these lovely words of Rachel Naomi Remen. And I'll read it out loud as you read to yourselves. So listening creates a holy silence. When you listen generously to people, they can hear the truth in themselves, often for the first time. And in the silence of listening, you can know yourself in everyone. Eventually, you may be able to hear in everyone and beyond everyone, the unseen singing softly to itself and to you. So that's by Rachel Naomi Remen. And I'm going to stop share, and Deb and I are going to look at some questions. If you have any questions. All right, I think that the quote the person was looking for is on slide 9. So let me share again, just a second. Yeah, slide 9. So there's a quality of, so here you go. I hope this is what you're looking for. Okay.
So I have a quick question. So often when we're doing work with people that are going through change, there's a lot of focus on the communications out. It's the messaging out. And what they tend to miss is the listening part. So can you talk a little bit about how you would apply what you've talked about here in listening to people that are trying to drive change?
So in the context of change, we can begin with knowing that our nervous system is alert. We know that the nervous system is showing up differently. So we want to focus on our ability to listen with presence, right? Now, when we're going through change, we bump into, so change is really at level 4 listening. It's generative, it's new beginnings, it is what people don't know yet. But what it bumps up against is level 2 listening. Most often is, listening for differences. This is not consistent with what I believe should be happening. There may be disagreement. So in that case, it's really they're listening from legacy, from their history. Usually there's a stake in the ground. And the opportunity here is to really get behind Why are they seeing the difference? What is that seeing? What is that difference that they're seeing? People don't change easily, but if we can get behind them, if we can listen empathetically, we can get behind what's the story in this person's head that's leading them to believe such and such, we can begin to meet them. We can begin to move them into a place that's more familiar and comfortable with any kind of change. So really, it's about going back to home base, listening for connection, level 3, and then you don't want to go from 4 to 2. You don't want to go from 4 to 1. You need to reorient 4, 3, 2, 4, 3, 1, and back. It's sort of like hopscotch.
There's another question, I think it's somewhat related. How do you balance the need to fully listen with our need to feel like we ourselves are being heard?
Can you say that again? Let me just see if I can find that.
It's in the Q&A from Randy. How do you balance the need to fully listen with our need to feel like we ourselves are being heard?
That's the work. That's the work. And I'm speaking to you from the space of for years not being heard. Where I go with that is, again, it's compassion. It's listening compassionately, level 3. It's opening up the heart. And it's listening for, how am I going to connect? How can I be heard? And how can I hear others? Typically, when we tell people and we experience from someone that we are hearing them, and it's more than words. It's more, so a lot of people talk about active listening and action listening, which is basically regurgitating what somebody else has just said. That's not what we're talking about here. This is about really feeling into, what is this person trying to tell me? What is their story behind this? And how can I relate to it? So when we talked earlier about how are you connecting with this story, or are you disconnecting, finding the ways to connect with the stories of others and helping people find ways for them to connect to your stories is the way to go. But really, that's the work.
Terrific. I'm not seeing any other questions at this time. Any last questions?
So, all right.
Okay.
Well, I think you have the gift of a couple more minutes of time. And Deb, do you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, I just want to thank you so much. This was a really fantastic session. I've learned a ton, and I hope that others in the group learned it as well. Look forward to seeing everybody at future sessions here later today and tomorrow.
Yeah. Thank you, Deb. And thank you, everybody. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you.